Good afternoon. This is Lessons of the Road, Part 3, Night of the Ticks. So in my journey across Canada, I had a lot of time to reflect and think about events and situations that had taken place during my lifetime, and how they affected me, and what lessons I derived from those experiences. So I had a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time to think about things, and the Night of the Ticks is one of the things that I thought a lot about later. So let me tell you what happened. I was in Saskatchewan, southern Saskatchewan, and walking. The night was getting late. The prairies turned out to be quite a hard place to camp because there's not a lot of shelter, and ditches are wide, full of water and mud, and it was just a really awkward place to find a campsite. Right across eastern Alberta and Saskatchewan and most of Manitoba. So I came across a abandoned farmyard, and it looked like a good place. I was aware of the ticks, but I wasn't, I was cautious. I didn't know about cautious. I was just aware of them. So I walked into this abandoned farmyard and set my tent up in the middle of the driveway with the intent of staying out of the tall grass, which is where I knew the ticks were. So I got my tent set up. My gear was sitting outside, and I thought I'd just kind of do a bit of a walkabout and see what the farmyard looked like. And when I got back to my tent, I was going to put all my gear inside, and I looked down on my leg, on my right leg, and I remember this kind of like a brown patch of color kind of walking up my leg. And it turned out it was about, well, I didn't count them, but probably 10 or 15 ticks. They kind of formed like a herd. And they had all got on me at the same place, I guess, and decided to walk up my leg. I had my shorts on, and so I panicked. You kind of brush them all away fast, and then you realize that you've been walking in grass, and there could be more. So kind of upon further inspection, I discovered my socks that were sticking out of my boots had ticks on them. I had other ticks crawling up my leg. I looked at my gear. There was ticks crawling on my gear. And looked at my tent, and there was ticks crawling on the tent. But I didn't have a lot of options at that point. It was starting to get dark, and I had to kind of get to bed. So I inspected my gear as well as I could, and my clothing and everything, and climbed in the tent, did up the zipper, turned on the light that I had, my bubble light, and then I started inspecting everything for ticks. I found a jar of, I think it was magnesium tablets that was almost empty, so I emptied that, and used that to put the ticks in. And so I started inspecting everything, and I found quite a few, I think another dozen or so. And then when I was satisfied with my search, I climbed into bed. And then, everything's a tick. Every sensation you feel on your foot or your back or your leg, you're sure it's another tick. So I fairly restless night, and I did find a few more ticks, and pack up in the morning. And when I woke up in the morning, I looked out through the tent, the netting at the top of the tent between the tent and the fly, and there was ticks everywhere. There was, I don't know, I didn't count them, but I'm guessing 100 or 150 ticks on the outside of my tent, kind of waiting for me to come out, or they were looking for a way in. So it was really disturbing and kind of very uncomfortable, going back to a previous episode. So what can you do? I got dressed, and I tried to flick the ticks off of the tent doorway, and then I crawled out, and I started transporting everything to the edge of the driveway, close to the highway, where there wasn't any long grass, and the driveway was quite wide. So I got everything up there in pieces and just started shaking everything out, tent and sleeping bag and just everything. So then, as you start walking down the road, and I'd feel a tick crawling up my back or something, and for the next couple of weeks it was all about ticks, it seemed, and it's quite a few. It's quite unsettling, I guess. That the second night I'd emptied my tick jar during the day, and so the second night I had my tick jar available, and once again everything that I felt, you feel like it's a tick. Of course they all weren't, but you're sure there's another tick, so you turn the light on, take a look, and sometimes it was a tick, but most of the time it wasn't. So you're just kind of living in this very uncomfortable environment. But as the weeks progressed, I think it was probably about 2 weeks before I was kind of fully comfortable with everything. I became more and more comfortable with the ticks, and they became fewer and fewer. And I'm sure I was still picking them up as I was walking, because during the day, if you had to go to the washroom or something, you had to, go through some grass or through a field or somewhere, and you're bound to be picking up ticks. But in the end, I remember probably the last night that I was, or at least one night that I realized things had changed. I was sleeping, and I felt a tick crawling across my chin, and so I flicked it, and then I turned the light on, thinking, well, that wasn't very smart, because I'm never going to find it now. And then I thought, well, it'll find me in a couple hours, and then I'll turn the light on before I flick it. So I went back to sleep, and sure enough, a couple hours later, the tick reappeared crawling across my cheek, and I grabbed onto it and opened up my tick jar and put it in and put the lid back on and fell back asleep. So at that point I realized that things had changed and I was no longer terrified by this whole experience, and I was quite calm when I found a tick on me. So the weeks after that, I often thought about how, I guess, scared or uncomfortable I was when it first started, and how through experiencing the ticks, I became more comfortable with them. And what was that about? And I realized that I wasn't scared or uncomfortable with them at the beginning because of past experience. I was there because of what I had been told or what I had read, or through media of some sort. I had developed this fear of ticks. The fear had been, more or less taught to me. And once I had experienced the ticks, the fear disappeared. So that was kind of a realization, and then I expanded that thought into other fears and kind of predetermined reactions that a person has. And then realizing that there's some good learning in experiencing life, firsthand experience, and it often isn't as scary as what you read or what somebody has told you. And I think it's a better way to learn, to experience. I mean, a lot of things we can't experience just because they're outside of our realm, our living conditions, or where we live, or who we live with, or whatever our situation is at the time. But having that fear of the ticks so deep in me was, a real lesson in life and learning and sort of living and experiential learning rather than the media style learning that we do a lot of, and so be it. But so it caused a lot of thinking about other situations and other fears, and I think to some of the lessons that we had with Jose Luis Herrera, and how experiential learning is the single best style of learning that you can have. It causes the deepest learning and the most true, and getting out there and trying something rather than reading about it is often the better way to go. So that's my realization and my lesson around that for me. It's the fears we have are often not based on experience, not based on real live learning. They're based on other people's interpretation of what is scary, and what is not acceptable type thing. So it was a good lesson. It was a good learning. So yeah, that was the night of the ticks. And it's funny when I tell this story how many people sort of shiver as I'm talking. So I'm not the only one, I don't think, that sort of has this fear of ticks. And I can say that since then I've something I never used to do was pick a spider up by its legs to put it outside if I found a spider in the house. I was always get a piece of paper and a glass and slide the paper under, put the cup over, take it outside. Lately, I've just been grabbing the spider by the legs and carrying it outside and letting it go. So that's something I would have never done before. So interesting. So yeah. So thank you very much. That was my lesson of the ticks, the night of the ticks. So next week we are going to talk about something somewhat related around fear. So many of these subjects that we are going to talk about are related. Being comfortable and uncomfortable. So it's kind of interesting how they do tie into each other, and so next week's also ties in around the fear, and it's going to be titled Fear and Arrogance. Which one is dangerous and which one is limiting? Okay, I will talk to you next week. Have a great day. Thank you.